Welcome back to HardBall. One of the most incredible aspects of this bin Laden story is that he'd been in hiding in a $1 million compound, not a cave, and he was not in a remote area up in the northwest of Pakistan. It was in a town just 35 miles outside of Islamabad, the capital, right by the Pakistani military academy, that country's West Point, right there next to it. While the Pakistani government is saying it knew nothing about bin Laden's whereabouts, it does seem peculiar he was able to hide in a mansion so near the capital. Are they telling the truth over there in that capital that they knew nothing? Richard Engels, NBC's chief foreign correspondent. He's in Benghazi tonight, another trouble spot. And Roger Kress, he's a former White House counterterrorism official and an NBC News terrorism analyst. Richard Engel, I always go to you first because of your service for this network and the world. I have to ask you, does anybody in Pakistan believe they didn't know he was there? Because this is an insult to their ISI as well as a question.
We were told that no senior-ranking military officials knew, and we heard that from Washington sources. So by that implication, it seems that some junior members, low-ranking military officers, did know that Osama bin Laden was in this military or was in this compound in this military community. How could he exist in a walled compound, a compound that didn't take out the trash? They burned it. It had no telephone lines. Just down the street from West Point, their equivalent of West Point, in an area full of retired generals. So somebody knew, and according to sources, no one senior, but certainly some junior members of the Pakistani military.
Okay, let's think like spooks think, like CIA agents in any country, ISA people. You're looking for somebody hiding who's on the lam, who's hiding from somebody. So you look for a guy who lives in a walled mansion. You look for a guy who lives in a way that has barbed wire, who never comes out, nobody ever sees him. Doesn't that look like a guy who's on the run? Doesn't it look like exactly like a guy who's on the run?
Or it could be a guy who is very important. And in a country where you're not conditioned, you're not trained to ask questions, it could be the equivalent of an HVT, a high-value target of a different variety. So the neighborhood and even mid-level officials, like Richard said, could say, if someone's in here of consequence, it may not have been known that it was bin Laden.
But wouldn't the local prefect know, the local official who runs the Chevy Chase police station where I live or something, wouldn't that person know who lived in this gigantic house? It's a police state.
If the prefect gets $25,000 from somebody and says, don't ask questions, we got someone in here of importance, he'll keep his mouth shut.
Well, let's take a look at the Pakistani state. We have this statement from the bin Laden state. Let's take a look at this statement right now. The Pakistani government put out a statement today saying, quote, now we can believe this or not, I'm not sure we do. Bin Laden's death illustrates the resolve of the international community, including Pakistan, to fight and eliminate terrorism. It constitutes a major setback to terrorist organizations around the world. Pakistan has played a significant role in efforts to eliminate terrorism. We have had extremely effective intelligence sharing arrangements with several intelligence agencies, including that of the U.S. We will continue to support international efforts against terrorism. That's rather bland, Richard. Is it believable?
Well, it depends how far back you want to go. There's recent reporting from our good friend Bob Windrum over there in New York that says that one of the main sources of information, a person interrogated at Guantanamo Bay, was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, that he was one of two Gitmo detainees who gave up this intelligence to interrogators, gave the name of the courier that was trusted by bin Laden to, and that it was following this courier that ultimately led to his capture. Well, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed wouldn't have been captured without help from the Pakistanis. So if you go back to a historic relationship, the Pakistani role has been very significant.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me let's try to figure this out. The United States goes into a country. It's not our country, it's their country. And yet we're able to track somebody within their country that they can't track. How's that work?
Well, it works because you have a country like Pakistan where everyone is not sharing the information across all levels, number one. Number two, we have possession of information and capability they simply don't. You know, that statement that Pakistan has released, that is all factually accurate, but it doesn't tell the full story. Their government is schizophrenic, and they have been for years when it comes to the issue of al-Qaeda. And so they're going to help us when it suits their interests, and they're not when it runs counter. And this is a classic example of we, the United States, believing if we shared information, we ran the risk of blowing the operation. And it speaks to how confident the president was in doing this operation, Chris, but also how risky. He was willing to blow up our relationship with Pakistan if this went south for this shot at bin Laden.
You know, I think he had to as president. We showed that clip of him during the debate promising. I think most Americans believe. Let me get to the larger question of your region, Richard. You're so good at this. The whole ocean, we were on 4 fronts over there, shooting predators into Pakistan, fighting in Afghanistan, fighting in Iraq, and, of course, fighting where you are right now in Libya. Is it your sense, being at the battlefront, that this is going to reduce the urge of Americans to even be in that region in battle regalia, even being over there fighting at this point? Now that we got the reason we went over there, we got them.
Well, absolutely. And you look at the last decade, there have been 2 major ground wars. And I think you could even call them 3 ground wars, because Afghanistan happened twice. There was the initial push into Afghanistan, then the push into Iraq, and then the push back into Afghanistan. At the end of the day, it really wasn't any of these things that got bin Laden. It wasn't the deployment of hundreds of thousands of troops. It was a small group, 12 to 15 CIA agents and special operations forces that went in. Sure, they wouldn't have driven out the Taliban out of Afghanistan. They wouldn't have driven Osama bin Laden into hiding had that initial push gone in. But I think this might be proving a new model, that occupying states and nation building doesn't necessarily work for counterterrorism.
What a statement. Thank you so much, Roger Cressy. Thank you, Richard Engel, always. Up next, reaction from family members who lost loved ones in those 9/11 attacks. Let's go back to the scene of the crime. This is HardBall, only on MSNBC.